Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We're coming to you live from our studios right here in Southern California. That's right. We're here in our Guidus TV studios coming to you live right now to talk about a very special subject. Several subjects, in fact. The first and foremost is, what day is this? And of course, if you're with me during the live, and you're in California, it's still what they call Columbus Day. But is it really Columbus Day? And is it an occasion to celebrate? Because after all, we're hearing a lot of, let's call it disgruntled Native Americans. Some say Indian, or the indigenous Americans. They're not very happy about this. And why? Well, I found this online and I'd like to share it with you. Take a look at this right here. Columbus Day, or Cristobal Colon Day. He Christianized his name to Christopher Columbus. He got ships from Queen Isabella, Muslim crews, and Arabic maps. That's because Spain had been ruled by Muslims for 750 years until the Catholic invasion of Muslim Spain. And when that took place, well, you can see in the picture right here the kind of things that took place, not just in the United States, but took place there at that time. 1492, January, was when the last Muslim Khalifa of that area abdicated and gave over to the Italian Catholics. And after that, immediately they set up shop. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella came in, and here's the rest of that story. The Muslims were thrown into prison if they didn't comply with the wishes of the Catholic Church, which was basically convert or die. I think you've all heard of the Inquisition, and that's very famous because they used to put people on the racks and stretch their body parts out until they either snapped or died or converted to Catholic. Yeah. Now, if you said, well, I don't believe that. Oh, you don't have to believe it. But you don't also have to believe the earth is round either. There's a lot of people that say it's flat, right? This is a fact, and those people were speaking Arabic. Although they were Muslim, Spanish Muslims, they still had some of them that spoke Arabic. The non-Catholic Christians and Jews and Muslims all lived together in a very peaceful and harmonious life for 750 years, and the Muslims protected the Jews and the Christians against any kinds of invasion until they were overwhelmed by the Catholic army, which came in and, as we already said, they basically invaded and took over. They did allow the Khalifa and his family to leave, and it is said that as he was leaving, he turned around, the Khalifa turned back, and he looked over at Andalus, and he said that he wished that he could be there, and he started crying. And his mother said to him, "Don't cry today for what you wouldn't fight for yesterday." Now, I don't know if that's a true story or not, but we've heard that. But back to the reality, there was a very serious inquisition that took place for a number of years. However, some of those people were allowed to escape out of the prison and go back to what they normally did, which was to be the crews on 3 of the ships that were also commandeered, confiscated from the Muslims. Those 3 Spanish galleons, they called them Spanish galleons, were assigned over to Mr. Cristobal Colon, also known as Christopher Columbus. And with that, they had to also include a first mate who was of Jewish religion, and he and some of the others knew how to read the Arabic of the charts and maps that also were confiscated from the Muslims. The charts and the maps of a place that Christopher Columbus was to go to. Now, right away, when I heard about this many years ago, the thing that came into my mind was, how do you have a map or a chart to a place that supposedly nobody has ever been to? It makes you think, doesn't it? So this is why I think a lot of the scholars, especially in the earlier days, said that Muslims had actually been to the what we call America today, to the New World. It is also known that Leif Erikson, the one from, was it Norway or Sweden? I think Norway, long before had come to the States. Well, wasn't called States, was it? The New World. So putting that aside, let's talk about what happened with the one that we call Christopher Columbus. After the Queen had taken these 3 ships and assigned them over to him, King Ferdinand wouldn't go for it, by the way, but she caved in and said, okay, give him 3 of those old ships, tell him to go over there, because he was telling them that he was going to discover or find another route going the other way. From Spain, you see, you're right on the Atlantic Ocean, and to go to India meant to cross country, either go around the tip of Good Hope, which is a cape at the bottom of Africa, or cross the continents to get over to India. So he was saying that we got another way to go. But he also told them that there was gold involved. Now that's what they wanted to know about, the gold. And the gold and the slaves was the big goal for the royalty at that time. And here's what we found online. Let you take a look at this. It said, from rape to pillage to flat-out murder, Columbus and his men were the first Europeans to commit horrendous atrocities against America's indigenous people, the ones that they later called Indians because he thought he landed in India. However, let's check this out. Columbus, never set foot on what we call American soil today. He only landed in the islands of the Caribbean, depending on how you pronounce it. And his goal was to find gold and slaves. That was his target, and that's what he wanted. And when he got back to Spain, he came back from the Caribbean, showing them that he had found some gold, and he talked about these slaves. So they allowed him to take 17 more ships, 17 more, and 1,200 men. And he traveled from island to island, grabbing up these indigenous people as captives. And in 1495, that's 3 years after his first voyage. His first voyage was in July of 1492, and he didn't get here, to those islands, until October. So it took him all the way from July to October to arrive. Anyway, 3 years later, in a large slave raid, Columbus and his men rounded up 1,500 Arawak men, women, and children. He put them in pens like pigs. They selected what they considered to be the best and the strongest of these natives. They loaded them onto ships and sent them back to Spain. On the way, over 200 of them died, and they just threw them overboard. The survivors were sold as slaves in Spain, And this is what Columbus wrote in his own diary. He said, "Let us, in the name of the Holy Trinity, go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." No doubt about it. They were saying they were doing it in the name of that religion of that time. The following list describes a sampling of the reasons why many people consider Columbus as an awful person. This information that we're presenting right now is from Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. In his journal, his diary, he also wrote, Columbus wrote, "We should subjugate them all." He didn't mince words. His intentions were clear. After meeting the Arawak natives in the Bahamas in 1492, he described the encounter in this manner. He said, "They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They did not bear any arms, no weapons," okay? And do not know about them. "For I showed them a sword, and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They had no iron. Their spears were actually made out of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want." And he added, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies," he called it the Indies, "on the first island that I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts." Doesn't sound like a very nice way to operate, does it? Slaves weren't enough for Columbus or the Spanish king and queen. King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, and Columbus wanted one thing. Above everything else, gold. Columbus went back with his crew, believing that they were going to find gold in fields of the province of Haiti. And his men ordered all the natives that were 14 years or older to go out and collect a thimble worth of gold every day. And if they didn't do so, they would cut off their hands. They did that. And there was really no gold around, just a little dust in the streams, and many of the natives ran away. They fled. But they were hunted down and killed by the conquistadores, the Spaniards. They weren't really the Spaniards. According to us, they were the Italians who moved in on Spain, okay? Let's tell it like it really is. For 750 years, Muslims ruled Spain. And I'll tell you a little personal story in a minute, but first let's finish with this. If captivity and death weren't enough, Columbus and his men had a particular reputation for cruelty. Bartolome de las Casas, a young priest who participated in the conquest of Cuba, wrote a history of the Indies, and listen to this. He described the treatment of those natives. He said it was endless testimonies proving the mild and pacific temperament of these lovely natives. But our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. This is all what he's saying. This is the monk who was with them. Subhanallah. The admiral, he continues, it is true, was blind as those who came after him, and he was so anxious to please the king that he committed irreparable crimes against these people. Las Casas describes how the Spaniards rode on the backs of the natives, how the Spaniards thought nothing of knifing Indians, they called them Indians, by the tens, the 20s, and cutting off slices of them to test the sharpness of their blades. He also adds that two of these so-called Christians met, he called them so-called Christians, by the way. You know why? Because he didn't think this was the Christian attitude, and you know and I know that it's not. This is not what Christianity teaches. It is not what the Catholics today believe, so please don't take this out of context. This was those people back 500 years ago, all right? So let's keep that in balance. So he said these so-called Christians met two little Indian boys one day, each of them carrying a parrot. These men took the parrots away from the boys and then chopped their heads off. Not the parrots' heads, the little boys' heads. Facing extermination, the Arawaks organized and attempted to fight back against the Spaniards, but they were no match against the armor, the guns, the muskets, the swords, the horses of the Europeans. The Spaniards hung by the neck or burned at the stake or burned in the fires, any of them that they took captive. And at this point, the Arawaks began committing mass suicides. They fed cassava poison to their little infant children just to save them from the Spanish Inquisition. In 2 years, half of the 250,000 of the indigenous people on Haiti were dead, either through murder, mutilation, or suicide. 50 years later, in 1550, there were only 500 of them left. Imagine, only 500 out of 250,000. And by 1650, the Arawaks had been wiped out and into extinction. So, in conclusion, is this really a day for celebration? Or is it a day of shame? So let's set the facts straight. And I ask you, please share this. Share this information. We publish this on our Facebook page. It's called y.estes. So you can go to, you can see it at the top of the page here, facebook.com y.estes. See it up there? All right? If you would like, I would invite you to like this page, follow this page, follow it. Okay, here's how you do that. Go right up at the top and you'll see follow right there. I'm already following it, so that's why it says I could unfollow it if I want to. And you can share this page with your friends. Very simple. Click on this, say something about it. Something like that. Please watch and share this page for Use of Festus or Guidus TV, whatever you want to do. And then you can share it. I'm going to share it to a page that we manage, and that will be Guidus TV. All right? Boom. And now, whoever's managing the Guidus TV for us, they'll see that and they'll follow it. Simple as that. It's easy. Now, I promised you that I was going to tell you a little personal story about how this all affects me personally. Me personally. How? My father accepted Islam. So, and he's passed away, so we say, may Allah accept from him. Allah have mercy on him and accept. My father was an orphan at a very young age. His mother died when he was 4. His father passed away when he was 9, leaving him at the mercy of whatever. He didn't really know his grandfather. He didn't know any of his other relatives except his brother. My father's name was Joseph, as was many of his ascendants, many people before him. It's interesting to know that my daughter is the one who found online, on the internet, about 15, 16 years ago, she discovered our ancestry. Yeah. And in looking at it, I realized, because I know the name of my grandfather and my grandmother, and there they were. Their name was Estes, as was the names of all of them before, all the way back to 1667. 1667 in what we call today New England. Yeah. Parts of Massachusetts and New Hampshire and so on, the areas, and Rhode Island where a lot of my family lived. Even before there was something called the United States, at the time when they just called it the New World. 1667, Richard and Matthew Estes came over on one of the ships. When they came over, they spelled their name like I spell it, E-S-T-E-S, when they got here. But when they were in England, they spelled it E-S-T-A-S. Not that that matters, but their grandfathers, 200 years before, were spelling it E-S-T-A-Z. And the grandfather before that spelled it U-S-T-A-Z, Ustaz. And they had escaped in the 1400s from the very persecution that we're talking about right now in Spain, not the one in the Caribbean, of course. But in the late 1400s, my great-great-great-grandfathers left out of Spain and came all the way to England, Kent, England. And they established themselves there as fishermen and people that take care of boats and so on. And that's what they did for over 200 years until they sailed over to what we today call America. I realized that that name, Ustaz, means professor or teacher, scholar or instructor, and it is related to a Turkish word, very similar, Ustaz, Ustaz. And it makes me really feel connected in that way to what was going on at that time. And I think that all of us, when we realize that there have been things done, atrocities committed in the name of religion, that it's our responsibility to identify those things and separate those things from what the religion teaches. Now, could somebody look at the Bible and come up with this? If they took things out of context, yes. There are stories even in the book of Genesis talking about the sons of Jacob going out and convincing people to circumcise themselves to supposedly enter their religion. But after 4 days of circumcision, the people could not even move because there's a lot of things that happen to an adult when they are circumcised. And they went in and slaughtered them all. Slaughtered them all. Killed the men, the older women, the older men. They only kept the young, strong boys and the young, strong girls. They slaughtered all the animals, and they sowed the land with salt. This is in the book of Genesis. Read it for yourself. I think it's like chapter 19, chapter 20, 22, something like that in Genesis. Take a look. It's called the rape of Dinah. They were trying to get even with those people, about 250,000 people that they slaughtered just because their sister decided to marry one of those guys who are not Jewish in the name of their religion. By the way, that chapter ends with saying that Jacob, the prophet, peace be upon him, was not happy about it. Okay, so he didn't approve it. Therefore, you can assume that that's not something that the religion should do. But what about the New Testament? The Prince of Peace. That's what they want to call Jesus, alayhi salam, peace be upon him. I'm not forced to believe any of this because in my Quran, it tells me only the best things about these people. Nothing like what I read when I was a Christian in the Bible. But in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 10, verse 24, chapter 10, verse 24, in the book of Matthew, it says that Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him, said, do not think I came to bring peace. I came not with peace. I came with a sword. Now, some of you know that I've talked about this before. I asked a pastor about this one time, and he started to tell me some bizarre story about how it was that, that they used to copy this in Italy. They had to replace the pages as they deteriorated, and they did it by candlelight. And, that people in Italy eat spaghetti. That's what they eat. That's famous. And that's not true. It came from China, but that's beside the point. And then he continued saying that, probably a piece of spaghetti fell down, and it looked like an S, and what made the word word became sword. Here's some of the problems with that, okay? Number one, that's not the only place that Jesus is talking about a sword. If you keep reading, he says to sell your coat and buy a sword. If you don't have a sword, buy a sword. If you don't have the money, sell your coat and buy a sword. So that's a lot of spaghetti dropping down here on that, isn't it? Whoo! Wow! And there's another little problem, small problem. You see, all of that text could not have been in English anyway. Why? Well, there was no English until 1066 AD when the Normans invaded the Saxons. So all that scripting or copying that they were doing was either in Latin, or if it was from the original Greek, then it would be in Koine Greek. And the word for word, the word, W-O-R-D, word, in Greek is logos, which has an S at the end of it, right? But of course, they didn't use American or English letters to spell it, but it was pronounced logos. So if spaghetti fell down on it, it would be slogos. But, yeah, right. And I know that that's very unrealistic. So somebody could use that, though, to say that it's okay to do something in the name of Christianity, because here we have Jesus talking about that I didn't come with peace, I came with a sword. Get you a sword, buy a sword. But and I know that is not really the spirit of Christianity. Nor is it the spirit of Judaism. Nor is it, and I think you know what I was leading up to, right? Nor is it Islam. There are those who want to take something that they find in maybe a hadith, a saying, a narration, something, and take it out of context and say it's okay to go out and do all of these things. But they haven't really read or understood the teachings of Islam in the entire context. The context of the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is very crystal clear. He even said he will not enter paradise whose neighbor is not free from his hand and his tongue. What does that mean? The one who is not safe from you slandering or lying or coming after him with your sword or whatever. And that didn't mean a Muslim neighbor. It meant any neighbor. Any neighbor. So how do you read that? And then in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told us that he's going to be against the one who acted with hostility, unwarranted hostility toward the people of the book, Ahlul Kitab, the Jews and the Christians. And what does the Quran tell us? Let's take a look at the Quran. And this is in chapter 3, Surah Al-Imran, verse 110. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. والله ومنع الكتاب لكان خير لهم منهم المؤمنون وأكثرهم الفاسقون. The translation: you are the best of nations raised up for the humankind, because you call to what is the best, the good, and you forbid the evil, and you believe in Almighty God. That sounds pretty good. Let's listen to the rest of it, though. Many people don't read the rest of the verse. I've heard that one quoted many times in the various mosques, but I don't hear people read the rest of it. That's half a verse. What's the other half? وَلَا وَمَانَ الْكِتَابِ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ مِنْهُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَأَكْثَرُهُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. And if the people of the book, the Bible, the Jews and the Christians, believe correctly, that's better for them. From them, minhum, from them are true believers, mu'minun. وَأَكْثَرُهُمْ, but the vast majority of them, fasikun, are corrupting, disobedient individuals. Corrupting and disobedient. When I shared this with a pastor friend of mine, I didn't tell him it was in the Quran. I just said, here's a quote. If the people of the Bible believed correctly, it would be better for them. And from them are true believers, but most of them are corrupted, disobedient people. Corrupting, disobedient. You know what the pastor said? You're talking about my congregation, right? SubhanAllah. Well, alhamdulillah. So I've covered some things in this program tonight that are very special, near and dear to me. And I'd like to wind this up with this one thing. Please, brothers and sisters, pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. When you want to know about Islam, it's not to go to the Facebook or to the Twitter or just throw it out online. Go to real scholars. Go to real teachers that know what the real history is, and listen and ask them and pay close attention to what they tell you, because they're spending their whole lives just to get this information to share with you, especially new Muslims, okay? You can find more about this on Guide Us TV. Guide Us TV is broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's free to air. Till next time, stay guided with Guide Us TV. Assalamu alaikum.